Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I feel like is hopefully highly anticipated. I'm going to be talking about Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. Now this book was published in 2021 and it was the sequel to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, a book that I previously reviewed on this channel and absolutely loved. So diving right in, Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World was written by Benjamin Alire Sáenz, the same author of the previous work, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. So let me start by saying, if you haven't read Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, there will definitely be a couple of spoilers for that book, just as we're talking about the sequel here. So please keep that in mind before you continue watching. Now to just dive right in with the overview. This story picks up right off where the first novel leaves off. In this story, we follow along with Aristotle and Dante as they begin a whirlwind teenage romance and continue to learn about life and love. Now to go into the plot and pacing of the story. So written in a similar style to its predecessor, Aristotle and Dante is composed of short stream of consciousness notes with longer conversational inputs weaved throughout. The sequel answers most of the questions posed in the previous text and asks many new questions about the world, society, and the nature of life. I found the pacing of the sequel to not be quite as balanced as its predecessor, some story elements being either too repetitive or too quickly skimmed over, leaving me as a reader feeling a bit confused or left out of a conversation. Now to review the characters. The main players of the story are Aristotle Mendoza and Dante Quintana, two young Mexican-American boys growing up in El Paso, Texas during the late 1980s. Aristotle, who goes by Ari, is a quiet young man who just recently came out. He's continuing to grow, work on self-acceptance, and is expanding his circle of friends and family whom he lets in. He acts as the narrator of the story. Secondly, Dante is an artistic, intellectual, beautiful young man who is Ari's love interest. In the sequel, we get to learn more about Ari's friends, his family, his schoolmates, and his teachers. At times, I felt like so many new characters were being introduced, it was hard to keep track. I couldn't help but compare this against the first novel, where the limited character roster felt both refreshing as a reader and realistic to Ari's experience as a high school loner. Next, I want to discuss some of the prominent themes found in the story. Firstly, this story attempts to cover multiple themes and ideas. These topics range from coming of age to social action. The latter topic is featured heavily, with the author not so subtly sharing their ideas about racism, the effect of AIDS in the United States during the late 1980s, feminism, gay rights, the US military, and the nature of physical violence. In general, I felt that some of these subjects were not brought up in a natural conversational way, but felt like the author was trying to force their own views onto the reader. Now to talk about some of the really good elements of the story. Firstly, let me start by saying that there are some really beautiful elements of this story. It was wonderful to revisit these characters and discover how their story would unfold. I definitely enjoyed laughing and crying with them. Secondly, I felt that the story contained some really wonderful moments grounded in realism. For instance, there's a scene where Ari and Dante meet an art gallery owner whose son died of AIDS. She's selling his art in the gallery, and the interaction these characters have is both really beautiful as well as a significant marker in Ari and Dante's relationship with each other. Now to talk about some of the bad elements of the story. Unfortunately, to me, this story felt really cheesy and not like a potentially cute Hallmark movie way. The sequel lacked the grounded realism that made the first book so incredible and emotional. I would attribute this primarily to bad writing. Beyond the multiple typos, this story felt disingenuous to Ari's voice. Instead, it felt like the author was trying to push their own views on social causes with no reality or depth included. Continuing this point, the author's views themselves are at times questionable. Number 1, there's a whole sequence where Ari's mom is sitting with his friends and describing how, as a straight person, she never had to come out, so she introduces herself as a straight woman. Number 2, There's a young man from their neighborhood who dies of AIDS. A group of the prominent Catholic women in town attend the funeral, with the exception of one woman who is immediately ostracized and classified as a bigot. Number 3. A sequence where Ari chooses a new name for a murdered trans character and misgenders her multiple times. Beyond these elements feeling generally weird or uncomfortable, they're also potentially dangerous. In my mind, attempting to rewrite the reality of what life was like as a gay man in America in the late 1980s. Not to mention a gay Mexican American growing up in Texas. I'm willing to accept that the paternal characters described in the novel are the exception and are doting parents who genuinely love and accept their gay children. However, the idea of painting society as accepting of gays in general during this time is beyond inaccurate. Furthermore, the author is using terminology like transgender, which did not exist as a commonly used term in the 1980s. To assume that a Catholic public school teacher who would know the term transgender during this time seems so ludicrous to me that it completely takes me out of the story. So this brings up a good question of how should topics around trans people be discussed in historical settings? I personally don't have the answer to this question, but my point is more about the lack of historical and universal realism, which I felt was so pivotal to the novel's predecessor. To go into my final thoughts, this isn't to say that there weren't still moments of real emotion. I felt emotional reading the continued story of these two young men, but I have to say it was really hard for me to enjoy these few good moments when there were so many really bad ones. To me, this story felt rushed and forced. If you told me it was written by multiple people, I would probably believe you, as the tone was so misjointed and felt like a complete separation from the first novel. With all this being said, I won't let the sequel tarnish my love for the first book, but I don't see myself rereading, and I wouldn't recommend to people who fell in love with Ari and Dante in their first adventure. If you stuck around to the end, thanks so much for watching. I'd love to know your thoughts if you read Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. As always, let me know if you have any recommendations down below, and I'd love to review those. Talk to you next time. Bye.